Hello and welcome to Ivory Blush Roses. My name is Lisa. Today is actually the third block in the Cretan series. I filmed this several weeks ago, and the reality is I was not happy with a lot of this block. So I'm refilming 3/4 of it, and I'll explain some of that as I go. I'm going to take the video for this block and cut it in two. I am going to use the very first portion that I stitched on this block. Then I'm going to stitch a second seam, and then we're going to redo the other two seams in a separate video, because I really want to get this one right. This is a stitch that might be a little bit more difficult, and a lot of you have been questioning, how do I know what measurements to use? And I was not happy with the measurements that I used in this video. So that's why I'm redoing it. I'll show you in detail what I'm doing. Let me show you some of what I had already stitched that I'm not happy with and why. Now I actually took out one seam already, and we're going to be redoing that one in this video. So I'm going to take these out. We're going to restitch this seam for this video, and then we'll do the two hexagon portions in the second video. I have a 5-seam block in the frame, and I have my threads chosen. Let's just quickly go over those. This one is a Valdani thread. This one I believe is a DMC. If it's not DMC, it might be a Finca thread. I'm not positive on that. We have our DMC Variations embroidery floss, which I'm using 3 strands, and this is a Karen Wildflowers pearl cotton. So those are the threads that I'm going to be using today. I'm on a 7-inch frame, and the frame is held by the frame stand. Normally, if I'm stitching my own project, I rarely use the stand. I usually just hold the frame in hand to stitch on. The other tools I have are my fine point disappearing ink pen. It's air and water soluble. And then I have my 1 by 6-inch Omnigrid quilting ruler, which I love because of the number of marks on it. Every seam on this block is going to consist of multiple rows. Like with many of the other stitches we've been doing, it's how you put them together. And this one makes some really fun variations. Last week we stitched this Oriental Cretan stitch, and the one we're going to start off with today is very similar to that one. We're going to be making little squares in here. Here's my little stitch map. I've just sketched it out. Because I want these inner pieces to be really regular, I would usually mark that because I need it to be consistent. All 4 of these are stitches I would normally mark. I wouldn't stitch them freehand because it would be hard to get the consistent look of it. I want to think about how big I want the squares to be. This dashed line here on the inch marks is my 1/8 inch mark. Now this block, for whatever reason, the seams are not super straight, so I'm just going to make it straight. And then I'm going to draw 1/8 of an inch on the other side of that seam. So I'm just lined up with my 1/8 inch mark right on top of that fold in the seam. So I've got 2 lines on either side of that seam, so that puts that at about 1/4 of an inch. I think this one actually looks like it came out a little far. The ruler probably moved a little bit, or the seam is a little turned there. And now I'm going to come along that, and I'm going to be marking every 1/4 of an inch on these. And we're going to do that on both sides. And we better mark down in here into our seam allowance. And then I'm going to bring it over, and I want to line up my inch mark with one of those dots, and I'm going to just slide it down to that other line. And so now I know that I'm going to be in the right spot. And see, we're actually going to have one off there. And I may not stitch to that point, but I'm going to use it to mark where I'm going. On this one, I also want to think about how far out the little legs are going to come. You could make these any distance that you want. You could make them really long, or you could make them really short. Let's go ahead and make them 1/4 of an inch. We're already kind of working on that 1/4 of an inch pattern. Again, that's this yellow line or that second dash in there, and I'm just going to line that up with my dots and draw across. And that just tells me where I'm coming out to. I could have done my 1/4 inch marks on either of these lines, and I just did it on the inner side, and that will work fine. On this one, when we go one way, we're going to stitch every other dot. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, it's kind of hard to figure out where exactly do I really want to start on this one. When that happens, it helps me to draw it out a little bit. So I'm going to say, there's my line. I'm going to come up here and then go straight out. And I'm going to come up here and go straight out. And then that one would come down that way. Yeah, okay. So now I can see my pattern. Sometimes I have a hard time visualizing it right off the bat, and so that's where that helps. I'm actually going to start out here on what would be that line. I'm going to stitch this one in that Jennifer Clouston style. So I'm going to go down here because I need a catch stitch, and I'm going to come up at that top line, and this is where I need it to go that way with the thread going over my thread. Pull it down, and now it is caught. And now I can come down to here. So when you stitch in that Jennifer Clouston style, think about that thread is always over the top of your needle. So that's that alternate way of stitching Cretan stitch. And again, it's a little harder when you're in the frame because it holds it very tight. But pull it up, down, and now we're going to come down here. My line is already fading. See if we can find that spot. So use your finger underneath to help push that needle up. So my thread is still over. One of the things that I did not mention, again, try and keep that thread over. When we stitched this method the previous time, is that when you're stitching this one, the difference is that you always have one thread that goes over 2 legs and one that's under 2 legs. Where in the traditional method it goes over one and then under the next one. So we'll just stitch this pretty quickly because we've done this a couple of times already. Going down on my dot up to my outer line. Now there's my dot, come down to my line, come up on the dot, over my thread, go down on the top dot, up to the upper line, over my thread, pull it down. There's the next dot. See, we're going every other one, down to the line, up to the dot. Now, I'm getting low on thread, but that should finish off this direction. So there's my dot, up to the line, over my thread, pull it down. Now we're coming down to this dot, go straight down to the line below it. Trying to come out over my thread. And we are just going to make that. Now I didn't mark that, so I want to just look at my previous threads and I want to try and go as parallel to that as possible and sort of tuck that under that seam. And then I'm going to do the next stitch going the same direction, but we're going to stitch on the opposite set of dots. Let's hope we have enough on this length of thread. I get all these little lengths of extra thread and I don't like to waste them if I can help it. So every now and then we need to use up some of these loose ends. We're going to have a similar variation going the other way, and that just is a happenstance, just happened to work out well that way. We're going to do the same method of stitching on this next row. I want to be going over my thread, pull it down, and I started out there in my seam allowance. Now I'm still stitching out to my seam allowance here just to keep my pattern going. And then, now on these I'm going to eyeball them because I really want them to be in the center, and it looks to me like that dot is a little over to the side. So I'm going to come over and put it in the middle. So don't feel like you are locked in by your dot. You're really not. Now the bottom one looks pretty good. Now again, we're going to go up to the top, and again, I think that's a little over. I think that looks more like the center there. Yeah, I think that's better. Again, the bottom dot looks pretty good in place. Now this one looks okay, so I'm not sure why we got off there. But you just make adjustments as you go. And now we're just coming up to that top one. Pull it down to the bottom one. I love the way that the thread variation worked out on this one to work going both directions. Now this one looks to me like we're right on the seam. I'm going to go ahead and stitch over my thread. And let's go ahead and put that in because I think it will look more complete. And then I'm just going to stitch that off into that seam. Just kind of try and tuck it underneath. And then I'll make my knot here in a moment. But you see how we got that nice little row of even squares for the most part. I think because we were trying to tuck that in, I didn't get it pulled quite as tight. There we go. That's better. And so now a nice little even thing. It's a wonderful border stitch. If you spread them further apart in both directions, you can get really big squares, and that gives you lots of possibility for added embellishment. So let me turn that over, and then we will stitch the second seam. I want to tell you a little bit about this block. I made a mistake, and I had a big gap in fabric here. And so I actually lifted this piece and refolded it so you can sort of see a little crease there. And then I've just attempted to stitch it down, trying to hold as much of this piece of fabric in place as I can. Now we're going to cover that with a fairly dense seam. One of the reasons for doing that is it will help hold things together and make that less visible. I also had a loose edge here, and it was really gapping. This block is pulling a little funny, and so I did hand baste that down. On this block, I have removed the other 3 seams that I stitched. I wasn't happy with this next seam, and part of it was because I was trying to do that with my block in the frame. And so you have that gap, and even with putting something under it, my lines were not even, the measurements were off, and I was just not happy at all with that block. So we're going to be redoing it. Let me talk briefly about these rulers. I usually use this Omnigrid ruler, and I really like it for a number of reasons. One, I like that it's got the 1/8 inch marks. I like that along these lines here we have the darker one that is the 3/16 and 3/8 inch lines, and then the yellow ones are the 1/4 inch lines. And you've got the clear inch marks. And I like the fact that we have that 3/16 and 3/8 inch marking, which none of the other rulers have. However, this one is about 1/8 of an inch thick. It's really meant to be used with a rotary cutter. And we're not using a rotary cutter, we're marking. And so occasionally I run into problems because my vision is distorted. So when I go to mark, I'm marking actually off to the side because of the thickness of that. And at those times, I like to revert to one of these rulers. This is a Westcott. It's a drafting ruler. This is another Westcott ruler. I think I also get this in the drafting section. But it's just got your simple 1/8 inch markings. But it doesn't have any of the 3/16 markings, nor does this. With either one of these, you get much closer to your work, so your marks tend to be more accurate. Now we're on to our second seam, And for this one, we're going to do another overlapped one, but we're going to do a triple overlap and we're going to offset it slightly. This is that seam that's kind of a messy, ugly seam. If I put my ruler on there, you will see it is not straight at all. So I'm going to pick from my point over here on my seam allowance and make it straight. I've marked my spot where I want to go from. I'm going to put my ruler up with that. And I actually want to go over here. And we're going to make that my first line. And I'm going to mark it out past my seam allowance there. I would like to go 1/8 of an inch on the other side of this. And this ruler does have nice 1/8 inch markings. You've really got an 1/8 inch grid on it. And so I can line that up so that it covers that purple line. And I'm going to just mark that 1/8 inch seam out there. Well, I've got to stop and think about this a moment. The problem that I've had is that I get so excited about stitching a seam that I get ahead of myself. So on this one, I've got my stitch map. Let's look at this more closely. If we look at my drawing of it, we need the line that's the base of this and the top of it. Now originally I thought I was going to angle them up, and I've decided not to do that. So we really just need the bottom and the top of that. And then we need the 2 lines on the other side. So this one's actually going to cross that seam. And I'm doing that partly because I want to cover up all of this uneven stuff. When I draw it out like this, I can actually put my ruler on there and see how far apart. I have almost 1/4 of an inch in the center there. So I am going to do that on this one. And I'm going to bring that down, and again I'm going to cover up. So 2/8 is 1/4. And if you're used to working in metric, I apologize, us Americans are still stubborn about using the old imperial system, so I'm going to stick with what I know, because I'm having enough trouble with marking without doing that. So now what I want to do is I want these stitches to be 1/8 of an inch apart as well. So I'm going to mark 1, 2, 3. So the beginning, middle, end. Now, I found I like having a space in between. So let's go 3/8 of an inch apart in between them before I start my next section. So 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. We're going to skip 1, 2, 3. So there's actually 1, 2. Let me think here a minute. This is what I was messing up the last time, and I just have to be sure that what I'm doing is really what I want to be doing, and I think that's right. I want 3 spaces, not 4 spaces. So 1, 2, 3. So that mark needs to be there, and 1 here. And so we're going to go 1/8 here, 1/8, 1/8. There's a mark. 1, 2, 2, 3. And I want to make sure I'm marking on my purple line and not somewhere else. So we have 3 spaces and then 3 marks, which are over 2 spaces. 1, 2, 3. So that's going to be down here. I'm going to mark a couple of them just in case we need to carry it out. Now this is a pretty right angle corner here, so I know I can transfer those marks down to this one down here. So I have my 1, 2, we had 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to mark 1, 2, 3. It should, if my calculations are correct, let's see here. I want to, yeah. So we're on the offset here. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and count that down. So there's 1, 2. Is that going to work out right? Yeah, it should work out right. Let's see here. Three, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then that next one would be way up there. So it just sort of sets them slightly in between here, and that's fine. I'm not a mathematician. Please do not ask me how I figure that out. I just know that it's going to offset ever so slightly and that it all works out in the long run. I unfortunately work a lot from intuition. So now that I have that marked using the firm surface, I'm going to go ahead and attach this to my block here. Now I am going to stitch in different colors than I did on the original block, because one of the things I had messed up on that block was the colors. So we're going to be doing this one in a pink thread, and that way we'll have green on either side, and I think it's going to balance slightly better without the two solid greens next to one another. And here you can see I'm just pinning my block down to the frame. When I get to this point, I'm usually working opposite. And I've been using these same frames over and over again with these blocks, and so there's lots of holes right in the area where I want, so I'm rarely pushing into new wood. Now we're ready to stitch, so let me go ahead and get this in the frame. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to start just barely outside my seam on the top here, and we're going to go up and we're going to go down right on that top line, and we're going to come back up on the dot, and that will catch my thread like we had another stitch coming in. Now this one, I need to ignore that dot. That was kind of my making my mark dot. So I'm going to come down here, straight down from this one, down below it. We're doing just a standard Cretan stitch. So I'm coming up on the dot, going down on the outside and coming up in the center. And now we're going to go up to the next dot, go straight up above that to my line, come up on the dot. And again, I can hold my thread if I need to make sure I'm going vertical. So this is our next dot down. So we're working our pattern. Think about the marks as groups. For the first row, you'll stitch the first mark in each group. For the second row, you'll use the second or middle mark in each group. And for the third row, you'll use the third mark for each group. And now we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Here's this one, but we need to come up to the line up above it. So if it's easier for you to mark on the outside lines, that works very well. I just happen to mark on the inside ones on this. And we're coming up at the dot. I rarely am so unhappy with a block that I pull everything out like I did on this one, but the more I looked at it and as I was editing, I just realized I was so unhappy with how it was turning out that I just felt the strong need to redo it. And I hope that this is going to be a lot clearer than what I had filmed before, because I was confused, and I think I would have been confusing to you in that particular video. I'm going to go ahead and stitch down there even though I'm out in my seam allowance, because I need to finish that pattern off. And that's going to come over here, and that's going to be well, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and stitch that one just because we're right at the corner of that block, and if that block shifts at all, I want it to look complete, and then we'll just stitch down right there in our seam allowance. I do find that on these I want to knot it and start over at the other side. You can work it back and forth, but on these Cretan stitches I find my tension is very particular, going one direction than the other. And so I want to maintain that for the best possible stitch. It'll make my seam look nicer if I do that. So it takes just a little bit more time, but I do think it is absolutely worth taking the time to do that. We're going to be thinking about where that would be coming from. Think about how this is going to come here. And so we're actually going to see that here. And I'm going to just sort of mimic that here. So I'm going to come up right there. I just kind of used my needle to parallel what would be happening further down the line. Again, I'm going to go straight up above my dot. Come up in the center. Now we're going to go down to this one, go down straight below it. And now while the uprights are 1/8 of an inch apart, the diagonals will not be 1/8 of an inch apart. They're going to be closer together. And what this is going to do, when we're all finished with it, is it will give the image almost that this seam is turning. And it's an effect that I really like. So there's my dot. Go down on the line above. And see, we're trying to cover up some of that seam. Now we're going to come down here to that line. Almost feel like that's getting a little wide, so I'm going to bring it back ever so slightly. Come up on my dot. And now we're going to come up here, come straight up above that dot. And then down. So as I'm filming this, I realize I am not at all sure what order I stitched these seams in. I just simply don't remember. So it may be a little mixed up here. Oh, and I'm way down in my seam allowance there, so I need to watch that. I don't want to go outside of it because we're going to be trimming that away. And that I think we can just stitch right out here. We don't need that out there. So that's number 2. So you could leave it right there, and that's a double Cretan stitch, stitched that way, just like this one is a double, just stitched in a different pattern. But I'm going to knot it off, and then we're going to come back to the other side. And this, I'm just spacing about what I had up here. So there's my dot. I'm going to come straight up to that line and go down. Come up on my dot. There we go. And now we're going to come down here, go straight down to that line, come back up on the dot. Now to this dot and go straight up to the line up above it. Come up on the dot. And you start to see that turning effect. Now when I was in one of my Crazy Quilt Group classes, one of the gals tried doing it with more stitches, and she had a pretty amazing result actually. So it's one of those things you can really play around with and see what works for the design you're doing, adapt it and make it yours. You could do each row in a different color if you wanted and get those rotating stripes. So we're coming right up to our seam there, up on the dot. Now we're going to go to this dot straight up above. And then down to that one. And now I'm just going to bring this one down straight into that seam allowance area. And I'm going to knot that off, and we're going to call that one good. So I'm going to leave this video at this point here. I'm really happy with this, the way it turned out. These measurements worked out really well, and I think that if we were to put, let's go ahead and put our Omnigrid ruler on it, you can see we've got 3 stitches and then we have 3 spaces in between. So 3 stitches and then 3 spaces. So there would really be 2 stitches in between. So the way it worked out is that these on the other side sort of fall right in between the way that works out. I'm really happy with the look of it. I'm happy with the measurements of it. It's worked out really well for me. And I tell you that this one took me about, I think I've been stitching for maybe a little over 10 minutes. When I did it the first time on the other block, and I'll pop the picture in here, I was so confused that it actually took me almost half an hour. So a third of the time to stitch that. So 2 versions of double Cretan stitch. One overlapping, making a square pattern in the center, and then this one that gives you that rotating effect as it goes. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today as I stitched these 2 seams, and for your patience with me dividing this video up. I know that I've had a gap in videos here, and I really am thankful for your patience with me in that. There's been a lot going on in my life right now, and a lot of people that needed my attention, and I needed to set stitching aside. It was a low priority item at the moment. People are always more important. So I'm hopefully back. I'm hoping that all of our issues have resolved that were causing delays in videos, but it may take me just a little bit to get back on track. I know I was hoping to get 2 videos out a week, and then I didn't get any for almost 3 weeks. So thanks for your patience. I really do appreciate it. Stay tuned, and hopefully I'll have the honeycomb video coming to you shortly. Thank you so much for watching. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next video.